professore Abraham Yehoshua non è potuto venire per ragioni di salute, ma ha accettato di tenere la sua conferenza via videoconferenza. Dunque è a Tel Aviv, lo vediamo adesso a Tel Aviv in uno studio, e terrà la conferenza e poi vedremo che cosa sarà possibile per il dialogo, sarà forse un po' più difficile. Lui parlerà in inglese. Just before I leave the floor to the rector of the university for a salutation, I just have to tell you that we have unfortunately had a difficulty. As you can tell, Professor Yehoshua is not physically present here in Rome. He has had health issues and has not been able to come, and he has accepted to give his conference via live video conference. So he's in Tel Aviv right now. He saw the audience, and he will give us a speech from Tel Aviv, and we'll see if there is any possibility of communicating with him afterwards. Padre Rettore, per favore.
Lui non vede l'audienza, vede il cardinale. Lui non vede. Eminenza, Eccellenza, signori ambasciatori, cari professori, cari studenti, signore e signori. Vorrei salutare tutti i presenti, in particolare i due relatori, che ringrazio per la loro partecipazione in questa decima nona conferenza annuale Vernen. Sua Eminenza il Cardinale Gianfranco Ravasi e lo scrittore israeliano Abraham Yehoshua, che salutiamo da lontano. Un saluto molto cordiale alla signora Aldegonde Brenningmeier, alla quale va il mio ringraziamento per il sostegno che offre al Centro Cardinale Bea per gli studi giudaici e per il suo continuo incoraggiamento. Un cordiale saluto di benvenuto va anche al professore Oded Hirshai, direttore del Center for the Study of Christianity della Hebrew University of Jerusalem. L'anno scorso il Centro Cardinale Bea ha evocato la figura ispiratrice del Cardinale Agostino Bea nel 50° anniversario della sua scomparsa. Quest'anno il centro organizza una serie di incontri con al centro l'arte, la musica e la letteratura. A questi incontri è stato dato il titolo generico di Arte come dialogo oppure Arte in dialogo. Si tratta, come accade questa sera, di importanti occasioni di scambio sulle tradizioni culturali ebraiche e cristiane e perciò occasioni di particolare rilievo per l'approfondimento della conoscenza reciproca, senza la quale sono vani i tentativi di vivere la fratellanza. I fratelli si conoscono e si frequentano. E questo un appello che Papa Francesco ha ripetuto diverse volte durante quest'anno e che ha avuto un momento di particolare significato nell'incontro di Abu Dhabi con la firma il 4 febbraio scorso del documento sulla fratellanza umana per la pace mondiale e la convivenza comune. A questo proposito vorrei ricordare che l'8 novembre scorso abbiamo avuto l'onore e la gioia di accogliere alla Gregoriana l'ambasciatore Ronald Lauder, presidente del Congresso Ebraico Mondiale, che nel contesto di una riflessione ebraica sulla fratellanza ha voluto affermare pubblicamente il suo appoggio alla dichiarazione di Abu Dhabi. Testimoniare eventi di un così profondo significato non può che rinforzare il nostro impegno di camminare insieme, affrontando le grandi questioni del nostro tempo, come sono quelle della pace, della cura della casa comune e dello sviluppo umano integrale. Le arti e la letteratura ci ispirano in questo cammino comune, sempre più necessario e urgente, e abbiamo il privilegio di esserne testimoni questa sera. Rinnovo il mio benvenuto e il mio ringraziamento e do la parola al padre Betò, direttore del Centro Cardinal Bea, che modera i lavori di questa sera. Grazie tante a tutti.
I will speak English for this moderation. Thank you, Father Rector, for these kind words, these encouraging words. We are very honored to have the video presence of Aleph Bet Yehoshua, who is also named the Israeli Falconer by the New York Times. Aleph Bet Yehoshua is the author of 11 novels, collections of short stories, plays, and essays. Some of his most known works are, for example, Mr. Money or The Lover or Facing the Forests. And he will be giving a conference this evening on the following theme: the crucifixion of Jesus as a correction to the story of the binding of Isaac. He will start by reading a biblical text in Hebrew, but it will be also translated at the same time. You will be able to hear it in both languages. Professor Yehoshua, we're very honored to have you with us. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. And we're happy to listen to your talk right now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. If we were to unravel the foundation of Jewish identity into its primary component, we would discover that beyond the religious commandment, beyond the various national sentiments, beyond the sense of belonging and connection to the land of Israel and to the Hebrew language, beyond certain historical and family memories that uniquely determine the Jewish identity of each individual, the common basis of all Jewish identity is the various dosages and strengths comprise several fundamental stories that had shed any clear indication of historical time and place and have become myth, which we can no longer be changed, only interpreted. This myth touches the binding of Isaac, the Akedah, the story of Exodus, and the other biblical stories, the stories of the destruction of the temple, and recently, in a certain sense, the Holocaust, have become the infrastructural component of Jewish consciousness and identity, both religious and secular. They have served for millennia as effective ingredients in the preservation of the identity of many Jews scattered among various land and continent, in the midst of various people and religions and assorted civilization, and for centuries without being specifically dependent on the clear historical context of a defined territory or language. These myths are the most primary basis for the existence of what I will call diaspora Jewish identity, which makes possible the preservation of Jewish identity outside history. In the famous phrase of Gershom Scholem, notwithstanding the terrible toll that this existence has taken on the Jewish people in the end. The power of this myth lies in the fact that one's connection to them can be immediate, in all places and all times, and beyond their original linguistic form. This connection finds expression in the sentence in Hebrew, בכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, בכל דור ודור אדם צריך לראות עצמו כאילו יצא ממצרים. In every generation, a person is obliged to regard himself as if he himself left Egypt. Zionism is defined as a return to history, a long, slow attempt to exchange gradually Jewish Israeli consciousness for a consciousness that is historical in the ordinary sense of the word. In other words, for a consciousness that is tied to the flow of true chronological time, a consciousness that is tied to a defined place and to unique linguistic expression, a historical consciousness that also recognizes the history of other people, compare itself to them, and examine itself particularly and morally with this yardstick. And consciousness that subjects itself to criticism and examination, and for return to real historical activity that lead to change and progress. In this process, we must struggle with the very powerful myth that control our life and try to confront them critically, expose their moral quality, and uncover their problematic meaning regarding the shaping of our consciousness and life. I wish to provide here an example of this type of confrontation through an examination of the story of Akedah, which is one of the most important myths in Jewish consciousness, a fundamental and formative myth in all senses. I would be so bold as to say that this myth is more important to Jewish identity than the crucifixion myth is for Christians. For while the myth of Jesus' crucifixion is fundamentally only to the religious identity of the Christians, the Akedah is of great importance and meaning for both the religious and the national identity of Jews. So, in this context, I do not intend even to charge upon the vast body of interpretive material, historical, theological, philosophical, and literary dealing with this myth. Not because I do not greatly value the interpretive material, but precisely because of the classical nature of the story, which permit each of us to approach it directly and freely, as does any classical composition. When we bestow upon a composition that honorified classical, we mean that above and beyond the circumstances of its composition, in particular period and historical and cultural context, it has transcended its time and also taken on great meaning, urgency, and relevance for those of us living in a different period and with it completely different culture and value code, as if it had been composed only now. The myth of Akedah is extremely important for the Jewish prayer and the Jewish national identity. As I say, the Jewish prayer connected to the religious ritual of Rosh Hashanah, and the story of the Akedah is in the center of this prayer, the beginning of the year. And of course, the questions of the shofar, the blowing of the shofar that stand in the center. In the Middle Ages, during the crusade and collective act of suicide by Jews, this story was very important in lifting the Jewish spirit. They took the example of what Abraham had done to Isaac when they slaughtered themselves and their children. The Jewish Akedah story is connected also to the theological tension with Islam through the Islam replacement of Isaac with Ismail. The Akedah story is connected to the covenant between the part in Genesis with the national patriarch Abraham. It is connected to Jerusalem. It gave the importance of Jerusalem, and especially the Mount Temple, in which there is now the Mosque Al-Aqsa, and in the past there were twice the temple of the Jewish temple. And people are saying this is the most dangerous point in the earth. Because from there, if there will be any trouble there on this Mount Temple, there can be a terrible war. So, accordingly, when I set out to analyze this multi-layered story, first by understanding its plain meaning, and then by determining what conclusion can be drawn from it, I do not do it only out of intellectual curiosity, but also out of a deep concern for the construction of the Jewish identity that all of us maintain within ourselves as Jews. And now I will read the story itself in its original language, of course the Hebrew, and then I will try to discuss it. ויהי אחר הדברים האלה, והאלוהים נישא את אברהם ויאמר אליו, אברהם, ויאמר הנני, ויאמר, קח נא את בנך את יחידך אשר אהבת, את יצחק, ולך לך אל ארץ המוריה, ועלהו שם לעולה על אחד הערים אשר אומר אליך. וישכם אברהם בבוקר, ויחבוש את חמורו, ויקח את שני נעריו איתו ואת יצחק בנו, ויבקע עצי עולה, ויקום וילך אל המקום אשר אמר לו האלוהים. ביום השלישי, וישא אברהם את עיניו וירא את המקום מרחוק. ויאמר אברהם אל נעריו, שבו לכם פה עם החמור, ואני והנער נלכה עד כה, ונשתחווה ונשובה אליכם. ויקח אברהם את עצי העולה, וישם על יצחק בנו, ויקח בידו את האש ואת המאכלת, וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויאמר יצחק אל אברהם אביו, ויאמר אבי, ויאמר הנני בני. ויאמר הנה האש והעצים, והיה עשה לעולה. ויאמר אברהם, אלוהים יראה לו עשה לעולה בני. וילכו שניהם יחדיו. ויבואו למקום אשר אמר לו אלוהים, ויבן שם אברהם את המזבח, ויערוך את העצים, ויעקוד את יצחק בנו, וישם אותו על המזבח ממעל העצים. וישלח אברהם את ידו, ויקח את המאכלת לשחוט את בנו. ויקרא אליו מלאך אדוני מהשמיים, ויאמר, אברהם אברהם, ויאמר הנני. ויאמר אל תשלח ידך אל הנער ואל תעש לו מאומה, כי אתה ידעתי כי ירא אלוהים אתה, ולא חסכת את בנך את יחידך ממני. וישא אברהם את עיניו וירא, והנה איל אחר נאחז בסבך בקרניו. וילך אברהם ויקח את האיל, ויעלהו לעולה תחת בנו. ויקרא אברהם שם המקום ההוא, אדוני יראה, אשר יאמר היום, בהר אדוני יראה. ויקרא מלאך אדוני אל אברהם שנית מן השמיים, ויאמר, בי נשבעתי נאום אדוני, יען אשר עשית את הדבר הזה, ולא חסכת את בנך, את יחידך, תברך ברכך, והרבה הרבה את זרעך ככוכבי השמיים וככל אשר עצרת הים, וירא זרעך את שער אויביו, ויתברכו בזרעך כל גויי הארץ, עקב אשר שמעת בקולי. וישוב אברהם אל נעריו, ויקומו וילכו יחדיו אל באר שבע, וישב אברהם בבאר שבע. The first detail that strikes the reader concerns the blessing given at the end of the drama. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sands on the seashore. Abraham's simple and obedient faith in God, which had him willing to slaughter his son without any reasonable explanation, was, according to the story, supposed to bring him and his descendant a great blessing of fertility and numerical fortification. But this blessing and hope have evidently not been realized. The Jewish people numbers have remained extremely low among the nation. Considering the Jews' great antiquity, this blessing may have been fulfilled in their survival, but it was not fulfilled in their numbers. This is a minor detail that does not go to the heart of the story, However, it gives us indication of the type of dialogue and the nature of its strength and effectiveness in the real world. If the criterion of great fertility is an ethical criterion as well, then at least according to the biblical storyteller, Abraham's successful try seemed not to have brought the hoped for reward, but its opposite perhaps. Now I wish to address to the heart of the story, which raises serious moral difficulties, as I am hardy to first to observe. If I were a religious person, that is, if I believed in individual divine providence and in the existence of a God who actually spoke to Abraham, the Akedah story would be very damaging to my religion faith for a moral standpoint, presuming that is a fundamental assumption of all religious faith, that God is not only the source of life, but also the source of morality and justice. In general, of course, no religious faith depends solely on morality. And once such a faith comes into existence, is generally able to overcome moral obstacles. I could say with irony, thank God I am not a religious person, and I am constantly exempt for having to justify religiously this immoral story. However, I must confess that even if religious stories were moral, and God spoke only with the voice of the prophet Isaiah, or even with the voice of the world's greatest moralist, I still would not believe in the existence of divine providence. I might respect such a religion more, but I would not believe in it. I know that it makes believer uncomfortable to hear a secular person declare that he doesn't believe in the existence of God and that he regards God as only a human concept, which different people employ as a means of expression. I must emphasize, however, that my disbelief stems from reservation not about Judaism, but about religion in general, from an inability to believe that there is in effect an objective divine system that maintains a religious connection with mankind. Had I been born to Christians, Muslim, or Hindu family, I would apparently still find myself in the same position of disbelief. I find disbelief natural and logical, and faith unnatural. The fundamental key words that serve religion is not knowledge, but faith. And philosophically, faith is not something objective, but subjective. It never leaves that domain. So let us return to the Akedah story. In my opinion, it presents extremely serious moral problem for any religious person who believes in God and thinks that God is also the source of morality and justice. Abraham's behavior is morally troublesome. It is true that the opening sentence, God put Abraham to the test, softened God's cruelty. As it indicates, there was no intention to carry out the slaughter of Isaac. This was just a practical experiment to test Abraham's faith. A God who carries out this type of experiment is, of course, still subject to criticism. When you perform an experiment, you intend to place the subject in a real situation. Otherwise, the experiment is worthless. Had Abraham known in advance, based on his knowledge of God, that this was merely a trial and that God did not seriously intend that the slaughter of Isaac be carried out, all of the experiment force and value would have been lost at the outset. There must be some real dimension to this trial. Abraham was supposed to believe that God seriously intended what he said. And since this was about Abraham's son Isaac, a minor whom Abraham knew had committed no sin, The very possibility that the boy would be slaughtered unjustly and for no reason theologically expand the range of God's evilness. God clearly signaled here that he can be unjust. Without addressing Abraham's reaction, the mere readiness of God to subject him to such a trial is extremely problematic from a moral standpoint, even after it became clear that this was just a trial. Its very possibility signals that there can be other real immoral trials. The story that the trial was conducted in order to teach Abraham that there is no human sacrifice in Judaism is incorrect. First, human sacrifice is not mentioned anywhere in this story. Second, Abraham is praised for his readiness to sacrifice the Isaac, and he is in no way is condemned for his readiness to slaughter his son at God's command. Abraham's moral flaw is greater than God. Without argument, question, or plea, Abraham is prepared to carry out the absolutely unjust divine edict to prove the magnitude of his faith and confidence in God. He is ready to abandon his reason and his sense of justice and to engage in the murder of an innocent. Here there is no doubt that Abraham knows very well that Isaac is innocent. Abraham's readiness and absolute obedience to the divine edict have inspired many horrible acts performed in the name of divine edict. From a religious standpoint, Abraham provides an absolutely immoral model for future generations. And in so doing this, he casts a dark shadow of the fighter for justice whom we saw in his argument with God over the destruction of Sodom and Amorah, with his just argument, will you sweep away the innocent along with the guilty? And shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? It is therefore no wonder that such a morally dubious story went unmentioned in the prophetic books, and that Christianity, which was aware of the suggestive force of this story of slaughter, made a moral correction to it in the story of Jesus' crucifixion. Jesus is ready to sacrifice himself for his faith in God. Here, despite a certain moral difficulty, there is a difference. A person sacrifices himself even though he regards himself as innocent, but he does not arrogate the right to harm someone else. It is therefore no wonder that the crucifixion story, which from an anthropological standpoint was perhaps built on the academies, has resonated so widely. Are we then left with an absolute moral negation of this myth, which we must categorically reject? It seems to me that this story can be particularly morally rescued when examined from a clearly secular position, and that holds that there is no God, and that Abraham acted with a complete autonomy on the basis of his own consideration and his own will. Abraham left his father's house as an adult for the sake of his new faith. He severed his family tribal ties, left his homeland and his father's house, turned his back on his unsettled faith, and went to a foreign land to establish a new faith. Now, as his days were on, and after his wife Sarah had at longer last borne him a son, he may certainly speculate that his son is liable to do him what he did to his own father. That is, leave his faith in the one God and turn to other gods and perhaps another land. His son Isaac, could, on the basis of his own independent thinking, do what his father Abraham did to his grandfather in Haran. How can Abraham ensure that nothing like this happened with his son? Instead of turning the residents of Canaan and convincing them to rightness and truth of the new faith, he chooses the easy way to ensure its continuity by pouring it into the generational chain that will emerge from his offspring. Accordingly, he stages a play through which he tries to ensure his faith's continuity in his son Isaac. So he takes Isaac up to one of the mountains, builds an altar, ties the body up, lifts the knife, as if to say, for my part, I can, and perhaps even ready to kill you, as much as I love you. I am also prepared to kill you, perhaps because of the mere possibility of your changing, and to do to you what my father Terah failed to do to me, to bind me to the faith. Then at the last minute, he stages a sort of recoil, as if he had just heard God's voice through the voice of an angel telling him, do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything to him. In other words, the message to Isaac is, for my part, I was prepared to kill you, but the God in whom I believe had compassion for you and did not permit me to kill you. Henceforth, now Isaac, you have to know that your own life, you owe your life not to me, your father, but to God who rescued you. In other words, he wants to implant in Isaac the continuity of his faith in a single God, not only intellectually, but also existentially. Thus, he says in effect, whether you like this God or mine or not, whether this faith appeals to you or not, you must continue it and accept it, because your entire existence and life are thanks to him. If you do not believe in my faith, you are doomed to death. This dramatic move was carried out by Abraham on the day of the Akedah, with all its props, altar, branches, raised knife, and rescued by the voice of the unseen God. It is entirely autonomous, manipulative activity of Abraham, with God's voice only an internal voice, is always found in every religious faith. According to the secular interpretation, from the outside, Abraham did not intend to kill Isaac, but rather to threaten and frighten him. He is therefore innocent of the charge of murder, or of blind obedience to a divine order to commit murder. He is not innocent, however, of frightening Isaac. Indeed, Isaac's fear, Pachad Yitzchak, is a dominant concept that arises in the Akedah story and appears in prayer in the liturgy of poetry. A lot of places in the liturgy of Jews speaking about Pachad Yitzchak, Isaac's fear. Chaim Guri, one of our great poets, expresses it well in his famous poem, Heritage. He writes it in the last stanza of the poem. Isaac, as we are told, was on sacrifice. He lived many years, saw good things until his eyes dimmed. But he given that moment to his descendants. They are born with a knife in their hearts. On Mount Moriah began the Jewish people distinguish language, which is, in my view, a very problematic tie between Jewish religion and Jewish nationality, still in a family form. This special connection is recreated anew by the forced repetition of the Akedah ritual. Abraham's descendant brings themselves to situation of the conflict with the surrounding, in which they are threatened with extermination and destruction, with the knife waving overhead, and at the last minute they are rescued or are supposed to be rescued by God's voice. Such a linkage in which religion is connected to a specific family religion, to seed in the biological sense, is created by Abraham to repair an old break in the biological chain through the abandon of his father's house and family. Of course, and this is my last comment, this connection between nationality and religion has been broken by Jesus. And Jesus has done all his effort to do the separation of nationality and religion. In the last chapter of Matthew, after the crucifixion of Jesus, he is the commission of the disciple. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptize them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. I want to say one word. Of course, the connection between religion and nationality is only partially in Judaism, because you can be secular Jew and still can be Jew. You don't have to believe in Jewish religion in order to be Jew. But in the future, and this is what upset me, and this is the problem of the future, we are going to one-state solution, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I want to separate ourselves, to divide the land for the Palestinians and for the Jews. But I fear that it is impossible. The question will be, what will be the connection between the Israeli Jews and the Israeli Muslims and Christians in this entire structure? Thank you.